The clock struck 11:45 p.m. when Officer Daniel Carter's radio crackled with static. He was parked outside a quiet gas station on Route 17, sipping his last cup of coffee before his shift ended. "All units, we have multiple disturbance calls near Brookside Hospital. Reports of violent assaults." The dispatcher's voice carried an unusual tension. Daniel frowned. Brookside was a small medical facility, not the kind of place for violent incidents. He put his coffee down, turned on the siren, and sped toward the hospital, unaware that within minutes, his entire world would change. 11:50 p.m., the first incident. Meanwhile, Lisa Monroe, a young nurse at Brookside, rushed down the dimly lit hallway. The emergency room was in chaos. A patient who had been brought in an hour ago, bitten by what his family claimed was a crazy homeless man, had suddenly flatlined. The doctors had tried to resuscitate him, but the moment his heart monitor beeped its final tone, the unimaginable happened. He opened his eyes. The man, now eerily silent, lunged at the nearest doctor, sinking his teeth into his throat. Blood sprayed across the white tiles as screams filled the air. Panic erupted. Orderlies and nurses tried to pull the patient off, but he was unnaturally strong. More patients, including those with similar bite wounds, began convulsing. Moments later, they too rose, and attacked. Lisa barely made it out, sprinting toward the back exit, her heart pounding. She didn't stop running until she reached her car. 11:55 p.m., first responder arrives. Daniel arrived at the hospital, stepping out cautiously. The front automatic doors were shattered. Inside, the lobby was eerily silent except for the buzzing of flickering lights. A metallic scent hung in the air, blood. Then he heard it, a wet, tearing sound. As he moved deeper inside, he saw a doctor hunched over a body, tearing into its flesh with his teeth. Daniel instinctively reached for his gun. "Sir, step away," he commanded. The figure turned, revealing milky white eyes and a blood-stained mouth. Then it lunged. A single shot echoed through the hallway. The thing collapsed, but moments later, it began twitching. It wasn't dead. It was still moving. Then came the screams from down the hall. More figures staggered toward him, covered in blood and bite wounds. Daniel turned and ran. 12:10 a.m., chaos spreads. Lisa sped through the empty streets, gripping the steering wheel. She had seen too much. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. She turned on the radio. Breaking news, reports of violent attacks are spreading across the city. Emergency services advise staying indoors. Do not engage with infected individuals. The transmission cut off into static. As she neared an intersection, her eyes widened in horror. Cars crashed, bodies on the ground, and people running in all directions. In the distance, she saw a crowd of figures swarming a gas station attendant, pulling him down as he screamed in agony. Then, one of them lifted its head. It looked straight at her. Lisa slammed the accelerator. 12:30 a.m., the world begins to fall. Across town, Matt Reynolds, a college student, sat in his dorm room, gaming with his headphones on. A loud banging at his door made him pause. Annoyed, he pulled off his headset. What the hell? He opened the door to see his roommate, Jake, panting heavily. His shirt was torn, his hands trembling. They're eating people, Jake gasped. Matt frowned. What are you talking about? Then, from down the hallway, a bloodied figure sprinted toward them. Jake barely had time to react before it tackled him. Matt stumbled back, watching in horror as his friend screamed, blood spraying the walls. Matt slammed the door shut. 12:45 a.m., the city burns. By the time Daniel reached his patrol car, the radio was flooded with frantic distress calls. They're everywhere. We need backup. Stay inside, oh God, static. We can't contain them. The infection is spreading too fast. Daniel's hands clenched the steering wheel. He had spent years enforcing the law, believing in order and control. But now the world was falling apart. He turned the car toward the only place that made sense, home. 1 a.m., the nightmare begins. In homes, streets, and alleyways, the infected multiplied. Those who were bitten rose within minutes, driven by an insatiable hunger. People screamed. Families were torn apart. Sirens blared. Fires raged. The first hour of the apocalypse had passed. And it was just the beginning. The first hour of the outbreak had turned the city into chaos, but as dawn approached, the true horror began to unfold. The streets, once filled with life, were now war zones of blood and screams. Survivors scrambled to find safety, while the infected roamed, growing in numbers. 1:15 a.m. Lisa's escape. Lisa Monroe's hands trembled on the steering wheel as she swerved through the streets. The city was barely recognizable, cars abandoned, bodies scattered, and eerie moans echoing. She had only one thought: find safety. Her phone buzzed on the dashboard. A message from her younger brother, Ben. Ben, Lisa, where are you? Mom's not answering, and Dad's gone. I'm scared. Her heart pounded. Ben was only 15 years old, home alone. She took a sharp turn, heading straight for her family's house. But she wasn't alone on the road. From the corner of her eye, she saw a man running for his life, chased by a group of infected. 5, 10, 15 of them. He banged on her window, screaming, "Help me!" Lisa froze. If she stopped, she might die. If she didn't, he would. Before she could decide, one of the infected tackled him. The others swarmed. Lisa forced herself to look away and pressed the gas. Her hands clenched the wheel as guilt ate at her. She had to save her brother. 1:30 a.m. Daniel returns home. Officer Daniel Carter arrived at his quiet suburban home, hoping against hope that his wife, Emily, and their daughter, Sophie, were safe. "Emily," he called out, stepping inside. His gun was raised, his pulse racing. The house was eerily silent. Too silent. Then he heard a faint whimper. Daniel rushed upstairs, kicking open Sophie's bedroom door. His 5-year-old daughter sat in the corner, hugging her teddy bear. Tears streamed down her face. "Daddy," she whispered. Daniel dropped to his knees, pulling her into his arms. "Where's Mommy?" Sophie pointed toward the hallway. The bathroom door was slightly open. He moved toward it, hand shaking. "Emily?" A wet, gurgling sound came from inside. Daniel slowly pushed the door open and froze in horror. Emily stood hunched over the sink. Her reflection in the mirror was terrifying, veins blackened, eyes cloudy, blood dripping from her lips. She turned her head, locking eyes with him. Then she lunged. Daniel didn't hesitate. Bang! The gunshot rang through the house as Emily's body collapsed. Sophie screamed. Tears burned Daniel's eyes, but there was no time to grieve. He grabbed Sophie and ran. They had to get out. 2 a.m. The college nightmare. Matt Reynolds had barricaded himself inside his dorm room. His roommate, Jake, was dead, or worse, one of them. Outside his window, the campus had transformed into a feeding ground. Students ran in all directions, but it was useless. One by one, they fell. His phone rang. "Unknown number, if you're still alive, get to the rooftop. We're evacuating survivors." Matt's eyes widened. He grabbed his backpack, stuffed it with food, a baseball bat, and a kitchen knife. As he unbolted his door, a loud thud came from the hallway. His stomach dropped. Jake was outside. His head tilted at an unnatural angle, lips curled back to reveal bloody teeth. *T. Matt gripped the bat and swung. Crack! Jake stumbled, but didn't go down. He swung again, this time, harder. Jake collapsed. Matt panted, staring at his former friend's motionless body. Then, without looking back, he ran toward the stairwell. 3:30 a.m. The supermarket battle. Lisa finally reached her neighborhood, but it wasn't safe. Infected roamed the streets, scratching at doors, breaking into houses. Some people tried to fight back, gunshots rang out, but for every zombie that fell, 2 more took its place. Her brother's house was only a few blocks away, but she needed supplies. She pulled into a supermarket parking lot. A few survivors were already inside, barricading the doors. Lisa grabbed a metal pipe from the ground and sprinted toward them. "Let me in." A man aimed a shotgun at her. "Are you bitten?" "No," she gasped. A woman next to him glanced at the street. "They're coming." The infected had heard them. The shotgun man cursed and yanked the door open. Lisa dove inside just as the first zombie slammed against the glass. The survivors rushed to reinforce the barricade as dozens of undead began pounding at the doors. "We're trapped," someone whispered. Lisa exhaled sharply. This wasn't going to hold. 4 a.m. The city burns. By now, the outbreak was unstoppable. Police stations were overrun. Officers who tried to fight were turned. Hospitals became death zones. The military had been deployed, but they were losing ground. News stations went silent. In the streets, fires raged. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. The city was no longer a city. It was a graveyard. 5 a.m. The search for safety. Lisa had to get to her brother, but the supermarket was surrounded. Daniel needed to find shelter for Sophie, he couldn't protect her alone. Matt had to reach the rooftop before his only escape left without him. Each survivor had a choice. Stay and die. Or keep moving and fight. The next 18 hours would determine everything. To be continued. By dawn, the city was beyond saving. Survivors scattered, the military struggled to maintain control, and the infected only grew in numbers. The few who remained had to make a choice, fight or die. This was no longer about escaping. It was about making a stand. 6 a.m. Lisa's daring escape. Lisa pressed her back against a supermarket shelf, heart racing. Outside, dozens of infected pressed against the glass, their rotting hands smearing blood as they clawed to get inside. Inside, 7 survivors were trapped with her. David, the shotgun-wielding ex-cop. Angela, a mother holding her teenage daughter. Mark and Kyle, 2 grocery store employees. Ethan, a scared college student. Lisa. "We can't stay here," Lisa whispered. David nodded. "We'll be overrun soon. We need a way out." Kyle cursed. "The only exit is the back door, but it's locked with a security code." Manager had it. Lisa turned to Angela. "Your daughter, how long has she been quiet?" Angela hugged her child tighter. "Too tight." David tensed. "Angela. Is she bitten?" Angela's lips quivered. No, she's just sick." Lisa's stomach dropped. The girl was pale, sweating, shivering. She had seen this before. "She's turning," David whispered. Angela shook her head violently. "No. She's fine." Suddenly, the girl seized and convulsed. Her eyes rolled back. Then she screamed. Lisa barely had time to react before the girl lunged at her mother, biting into her shoulder. Angela wailed in agony. David raised his shotgun. "Wait," Lisa screamed. Bang! The gunshot echoed. Angela collapsed, blood pooling around her as her daughter's infected body twitched next to her. Lisa stared in horror. David lowered the shotgun. She was already gone. No one spoke after that. Then came the sound of glass shattering. The infected had broken through. "Move!" David shouted. They ran for the back door as the creatures poured inside. 6:30 a.m. Daniel's last line of defense. Officer Daniel Carter held Sophie's hand tightly as he approached the police station. But when he got there, his hope died. The station was overrun. Bodies of fallen officers littered the parking lot. Some had turned, some had been shot in the head. The remaining officers, about 10 of them, were holed up behind makeshift barricades, using their last bullets to fight back. Daniel recognized Captain Harris, his commanding officer, barking orders. He rushed forward. "Captain!" Harris turned, his face covered in sweat and blood. "Carter? You're alive?" Daniel lifted Sophie into his arms. "I need somewhere safe for my daughter." Harris looked at the little girl, then back at the barricade. "There's nowhere safe anymore." A horrible scream came from the street. A survivor, desperate for shelter, ran toward the station. "Help me!" he cried. Before he could reach the barricade, a zombie tackled him, teeth sinking into his throat. Daniel aimed his gun. Too late. The officers held the line, but for how long? "Sir," Daniel said. "We need to get out of here." Harris sighed. "If we leave, the city is lost." Daniel looked at the burning buildings, the blood-stained streets. "It's already lost." 7 a.m., Matt's rooftop escape. Matt Reynolds sprinted up the dorm stairwell, heart hammering. The helicopter was coming. He burst onto the rooftop and froze. There were more survivors than expected. At least 20 people crowded the rooftop, all waiting for rescue. The chopper hovered above. A soldier shouted through a megaphone. "We can only take 10. The rest of you need to find another way." Matt's stomach dropped. 10 people? The survivors erupted in chaos. People pushed, shoved, screamed. One man pulled a gun. "I'm getting on that chopper," he yelled. The soldier aimed his rifle. "Drop it or we drop you." Then, from below, the stairwell door burst open. The infected swarmed the rooftop. Screams filled the air as bodies collided. Matt barely had time to react before someone shoved him aside. He saw the soldiers trying to lift people up, but the infected dragged them down. Matt's chance at escape vanished. He grabbed a metal pipe and swung wildly. A zombie crashed into him. He lost his balance and fell off the rooftop. 8 a.m., the fall of the police station. Daniel fired his last bullet. The police station had fallen. Harris was dead. The infected breached the barricade, tearing apart the remaining officers. Daniel grabbed Sophie and ran toward a police truck. A zombie lunged at him. Bang! David, the shotgun man from the supermarket, blew its head off. Lisa was with him. They had escaped the store. "Get in the truck!" Daniel shouted. Lisa and David jumped in. Daniel started the engine. The last thing he saw before driving off, the city collapsing behind them. 9 a.m., a new plan. Daniel, Lisa, David, and Sophie drove in silence. "Where do we go?" Lisa finally asked. David exhaled. "The military has quarantine zones outside the city. If we make it there, we might have a chance." Daniel clenched the wheel. "And if it's already overrun?" David loaded his shotgun. "Then we keep fighting." 10 a.m., the first stand ends. The survivors had made it out of the city. But the nightmare was far from over. The military was losing ground. The infection was spreading. And as they drove toward the unknown, one thing was certain. The first 10 hours of the apocalypse had been hell. The next 14? Would be even worse. The survivors had barely escaped the city, but the horrors weren't over. The road ahead was just as dangerous as what they left behind. With food running low, paranoia creeping in, and no guaranteed safe haven, the real question wasn't about surviving the zombies. It was about surviving each other. 10:15 a.m., the search for shelter. Daniel kept his eyes on the road as the police truck sped down the empty highway. Lisa sat in the passenger seat, still shaken. David, the ex-cop, sat in the back with a shotgun, while Sophie curled up next to him, exhausted. The city was behind them, but the infected weren't far. "We need shelter," Lisa muttered. "Somewhere defensible." David pointed ahead. "There." A gas station stood at the side of the road, its windows intact, no signs of movement. It might still have supplies. Daniel pulled over cautiously. Stay close. If it's clear, we grab what we can and move on. Lisa and David nodded. But what they didn't know. They weren't alone. 10:30 a.m., an uneasy alliance. The gas station wasn't abandoned. As soon as they stepped inside, a gun clicked. Drop your weapons. Daniel turned to see 3 survivors aiming rifles at them. Jack, the leader, mid-40s, rough-looking, ex-military. Mia, his younger sister, quiet but deadly. Tyler, a paranoid teenager, finger twitching on the trigger. David raised his hands. We're not looking for trouble. Jack's cold stare didn't waver. Everyone says that. Then they stab you in the back. Lisa stepped forward. We just need supplies. We have a child with us. Jack's gaze flicked to Sophie. He hesitated. Then he lowered his weapon. You can take what you need, he said. But we don't trust outsiders. Daniel nodded. Neither do we. For now, a fragile truce was made. 11:15 a.m., the first crack in trust. The group searched the gas station for food, water, and weapons. Tension filled the air. David found a map showing potential military safe zones. We should head here, he said, pointing to a location 50 miles north. Jack shook his head. That's a death trap. The military is losing this fight. Mia glanced at Lisa. Do you really trust these guys? Lisa hesitated. She wasn't sure. Meanwhile, Tyler rummaged through a drawer and found something valuable, painkillers. Daniel saw him pocket them. We could all use those. Tyler smirked. Finders keepers. Daniel clenched his fists. The cracks in their alliance were already showing. Then, a sound outside. A car. Someone was coming. 12 p.m., a deadly encounter. A black SUV pulled up to the gas station. 6 men stepped out. Armed. Dangerous. Jack tensed. Raiders. Lisa's stomach twisted. Who? David whispered, not everyone left in this world is trying to survive. Some are just hunting the weak. The raiders spotted movement inside. One of them, a tall man with a machete, grinned. Looks like we got company. Jack cursed. Get ready. The survivors barricaded the doors. Then the raiders opened fire. Bullets shattered windows, forcing everyone to take cover. Daniel pulled Sophie close, shielding her. Stay down. Jack fired back. We can't stay here. We need an exit. Lisa spotted a back door leading to an alley. There. David nodded. We make a run for it on my signal. Then, Tyler panicked. Instead of waiting, he bolted for the back door alone. A gunshot rang out. Tyler collapsed, blood pooling beneath him. Lisa covered her mouth as the raiders laughed. One down. The survivors had no choice. They had to fight. 12:45 p.m., kill or be killed. Jack, David, and Daniel returned fire. Lisa grabbed Sophie and ran toward the back. Mia hesitated, staring at her brother. Jack? Jack shoved her. Go! The raiders were closing in. The survivors had seconds to escape. Then, Jack made a decision. He grabbed a grenade from his belt, yanked the pin, and threw it toward the raiders. Run, he shouted. Lisa, Daniel, and the others sprinted through the back door. Boom! The explosion shook the ground. Lisa looked back just in time to see the gas station engulfed in flames. Jack was gone. 1:30 p.m., the road to nowhere. The survivors moved quickly, abandoning the wreckage. Jack's sacrifice had bought them time. But it had also changed them. Mia walked in silence, her face blank. She had just lost her brother. Lisa carried Sophie, whispering, "It's okay, we're safe now. Daniel didn't believe that. Nowhere was safe. David checked the map. We should reach the military zone by nightfall. Lisa sighed. And if it's already fallen? David's grip tightened on his shotgun. Then we find another way. Mia stopped walking. I'm not going with you, she said. Lisa frowned. What? Mia stared at David. My brother died because of you. I don't trust you. David took a step forward. I didn't. Mia aimed her gun at him. Daniel raised his hands. Mia, don't do this. Mia's hands shook. I'll take my chances alone. Then, she vanished into the woods. Lisa exhaled. We're falling apart. Daniel glanced at the setting sun. And they weren't even halfway through the first day. 2 p.m. The real enemy. As they walked down the road, a distant sound made them stop. A radio transmission. Daniel pulled out his walkie-talkie. Static. Then. If anyone, still alive. Safe zone breached. No help coming. Lisa's heart sank. David muttered, we're on our own. Daniel looked at the road ahead. The infected were dangerous. But people were worse. And the worst was yet to come. The survivors thought escaping the city meant survival. They were wrong. The world outside was just as deadly, filled with the walking dead, violent survivors, and the slow realization that no one was coming to save them. And as the sun dipped lower, a terrifying truth became clear. The city wasn't the only thing falling. Society was collapsing. 2:15 p.m., nowhere left to run. Daniel, Lisa, David, and Sophie trudged along the cracked highway, their shadows stretching as the day wore on. Mia was gone. She had chosen to leave. Jack was dead. He had chosen to sacrifice himself. The weight of it hung heavy on them all. Lisa glanced at Sophie, who clutched her teddy bear, silent since they left the gas station. How much further? Lisa asked David. David checked the map. The safe zone should be a couple of miles ahead. Assuming it's still there, Daniel muttered. A loud explosion in the distance made them freeze. They turned just in time to see a mushroom of fire and smoke rise over the city behind them. Lisa's breath caught. What the hell was that? David's expression darkened. The military's last stand. Daniel clenched his jaw. That means they're retreating. Lisa realized what that meant. The safe zones were no longer safe. 3 p.m. The death of a safe zone. When they arrived at the military evacuation site, it was already too late. The fences were torn apart. The once organized military camp was a graveyard of bodies, some moving, some not. Smoke curled from burning vehicles. Tents were shredded. The infected wandered aimlessly, moaning in hunger. Lisa swallowed hard. We were counting on this place. David gripped his shotgun. It's overrun. We move on. Daniel hesitated. No, we search it first. There could be survivors. Supplies. David didn't like it. It's a risk. Daniel stepped forward. Everything's a risk now. Lisa sighed. Then let's make it fast. They entered the camp. 3:30 p.m., the trapped soldier. The smell was unbearable. Rot. Blood. Fire. The group moved cautiously, weaving between the wreckage. Suddenly, a voice. Help, over here. They turned toward a nearby military truck, its doors half open. Inside, a wounded soldier leaned against the seat, gripping his side. David rushed over. You're alive? The soldier coughed. Barely. His name tag read Lieutenant Monroe. Lisa knelt beside him. What happened here? Monroe's eyes were filled with guilt. They told us to hold the line. Then the order came, fall back. Abandon the civilians. Lisa's stomach twisted. Daniel scowled. They left people to die. Monroe nodded weakly. The ones who refused got executed for disobeying orders. Lisa whispered, so there is no safe zone? Monroe grabbed Daniel's arm. There's one left. David leaned in. Where? Monroe exhaled. Fort Blackwood. 50 miles west. Lisa shook her head. That's too far. Daniel made a decision. It's our only chance. Then, a horrible growl. Lisa turned. Monroe's eyes rolled back. His veins darkened. Lisa's blood ran cold. He's turning. 3:45 p.m., a hard choice. Monroe convulsed, his breathing ragged. David raised his shotgun. We have to put him down. Lisa hesitated. But he's still alive. Daniel looked Monroe in the eye. Is there a cure? Monroe shook his head. No. Just death. Daniel swallowed hard. Then he pulled the trigger. Bang! Monroe slumped forward. Lisa wiped away a tear. We keep losing people. David reloaded. And we'll keep losing more if we don't move. Daniel glanced at the dying sun. They had two choices, travel through the night or find somewhere safe before dark. Neither choice was good. 4:30 p.m., the horde. They had barely left the camp when they heard it. A sound that made their bones turn to ice. A deep, guttural roar. They turned. Hundreds of infected surged from the trees. Lisa's heart slammed against her chest. Run! They sprinted down the road. Daniel carried Sophie, his breath ragged. Lisa's legs burned, but stopping meant death. David spotted an abandoned diner up ahead. There! They crashed through the doors, locking them behind them. The horde slammed against the glass. Daniel braced the door. This won't hold for long. Lisa scanned the room. We need a way out. David kicked over a table. We make our stand here. Lisa turned to him. You're crazy. David's hands shook as he loaded his shotgun. Then give me a better idea. Lisa opened her mouth, then froze. Sophie was gone. Lisa's blood turned to ice. Sophie? A small voice whispered, Mommy? Lisa turned. And saw Sophie standing in the dark hallway. Behind her, a figure moved. Lisa's breath caught. No. The infected lunged. 5 p.m., the cost of survival. Lisa tackled Sophie away, just as the zombie snapped its jaws where Sophie had stood. David fired, blowing the creature's head off. Lisa held Sophie tight. Are you hurt? Sophie shook her head, terrified. Daniel helped her up. We can't stay here. The windows began to crack. David cursed. Time's up. Lisa grabbed Sophie's hand. We run on 3. Daniel nodded. 1. The first window shattered. 2. The infected poured inside. 3. They raced through the back door. Into the unknown. 5:30 p.m., the end of civilization. They ran for miles. They stopped only when their lungs burned. Finally, they reached a hill overlooking the city. Lisa turned. And gasped. The entire city was burning. Fires raged. Buildings collapsed. The screams of the dying echoed for miles. Daniel whispered, It's over. Lisa held Sophie close. The world they knew was gone. David exhaled, gripping his shotgun. Then we build a new one. 6 p.m., the road to Fort Blackwood. The last light of day faded. In the distance, a road sign stood half buried in the dirt. Fort Blackwood, 50 miles. Lisa wiped the sweat from her brow. We move at dawn. Daniel nodded. David muttered, If we live that long. The first 12 hours of the apocalypse had shattered everything. Now, the next 12 would test if they had what it took to survive. The survivors had lost their home. They had lost their trust. And now, the night was coming. With no safe place to rest, no supplies left, and the dead growing more restless after dark, Daniel, Lisa, David, and Sophie had to make a choice. Keep moving, or die. But something worse than the infected lurked in the darkness. Something watching them. Something waiting. 6:15 p.m., nowhere is safe. The sky darkened as the group moved away from the burning city. The night air was thick with the smell of smoke, blood, and rot. Lisa carried Sophie in her arms, whispering, "Just a little further." Daniel walked beside them, keeping his rifle ready. David moved ahead, scouting for shelter. For hours, they had barely spoken. The weight of everything, the deaths, the betrayals, the endless running, hung between them. Finally, Daniel spotted a farmhouse in the distance. He sighed. "Looks abandoned." David nodded. "It's better than nothing." Lisa hesitated. Something felt wrong. But they had no choice. They headed for the farmhouse. 6:45 p.m., the farmhouse. The house was silent. Too silent. David pushed the door open. It creaked loudly. Lisa held Sophie close as they stepped inside. The house was old, dusty, untouched. A single lantern sat on the kitchen table, still burning. Lisa whispered, "Someone was here." Daniel checked the cabinets. Empty. David frowned. "We'll clear the upstairs. Make sure we're alone." Lisa hesitated. "And if we're not?" David cocked his shotgun. "Then we fix that problem." 7:30 p.m., a warning left behind. The upstairs was just as eerie. Dusty furniture. A bed with the sheets half pulled back. A journal sat open on the desk. Daniel picked it up. The last entry read, "They come at night. Not just the dead. Something else. Faster. Smarter. Watching from the trees. I hear them whispering. I hear them laughing. If anyone finds this, run." Lisa's blood ran cold. David muttered, "What the hell does that mean?" Then, a loud crash from downstairs. Lisa spun around. Sophie whispered, "They found us." 8 p.m., not alone. The survivors rushed downstairs. The front door was wide open. Lisa's heart pounded. Someone's inside. David raised his gun. "Stay behind me." They moved carefully, listening, but the house was silent. Too silent. Then, Daniel turned just in time to see a shadow move across the window. Something was outside. Watching. Lisa whispered, "The journal said they come at night." David scoffed. "You actually believe that crap?" Then, the whispering started. 8:30 p.m., the whispering. At first, it was faint. A soft, eerie chuckle. Then another. Then dozens. Whispers echoed through the trees outside, circling the house. Sophie clung to Lisa. "Make them stop." Daniel's grip on his rifle tightened. "We need to leave. Now." David checked the front door. "And run into whatever the hell is out there?" "No thanks." Lisa whispered, "What if they're already inside?" David froze. Then, a laugh, right behind them. They turned. The hallway was empty. Then, the lights went out. 9 p.m., the dark is not empty. Everything plunged into blackness. The only sound was the whispers. Lisa held Sophie tightly. "Stay with me, baby." David moved toward the door, his voice low. "We get to the truck. Now." Then, footsteps upstairs. Lisa's breath caught. Daniel whispered, "We cleared the house." David cocked his shotgun. "Then who the hell is that?" The whispers grew louder. Daniel grabbed Lisa's arm. "Move." They rushed for the door. Then, the front door slammed shut on its own. 9:30 p.m., trapped. David cursed and yanked on the door. It wouldn't budge. Lisa backed against the wall, her pulse racing. This isn't possible. Daniel aimed his rifle toward the stairs. A shadow moved at the top. Not a zombie. Something else. Sophie whimpered, "They're coming." The whispers turned into laughter. Then, a voice from the darkness. Low. Mocking. "You should have run." Then, footsteps. Fast. Rushing toward them. David fired. Bang. Silence. Then, a whisper right in Lisa's ear. Missed. Lisa screamed. 10 p.m. The escape. Daniel smashed a window. Out. Now. Lisa shoved Sophie through first, then scrambled out. David covered them, firing blindly into the darkness. Then, something grabbed his leg. David shouted, kicking wildly. Daniel yanked him out, and they bolted toward the truck. The whispering grew into shrieks. Shadows moved in the trees. Figures too fast to be human. Lisa shoved Sophie into the truck. Daniel jumped in. Go! David floored the gas. The truck roared to life, tearing down the road. Lisa turned. Something was running after them. Fast. Keeping up. Then, it vanished. 11 p.m. What did we see? The truck sped through the empty roads. No one spoke. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. That wasn't a zombie. David gripped the wheel. No. It wasn't. Lisa stared out the window. Then what was it? No one had an answer. Sophie, curled up in Lisa's lap, whispered, "They weren't trying to kill us." Lisa frowned. What? Sophie looked up at her. They were playing with us. Lisa shivered. And they're not done. 11:45 p.m. The road to hell. The truck slowed as they reached an intersection. Daniel checked the map. Fort Blackwood is still 40 miles west. Lisa sighed. We need rest. David shook his head. No stopping. Lisa frowned. You're exhausted. We all are. David turned to her, eyes dark. Stopping got Jack killed. Stopping almost got us killed. We keep moving. Lisa wanted to argue, but a single road sign caught her eye. Fort Blackwood, 39 miles. And beneath it, a fresh message, scrawled in blood. Turn back. Lisa's heart stopped. Daniel whispered, "They're waiting for us." Lisa exhaled, gripping Sophie tight. And ahead, the dark road stretched on. Straight into hell. The survivors had survived the city. They had escaped the whispers in the dark. But now, they faced the deadliest stretch yet. Fort Blackwood was still 39 miles away, and the road ahead was more dangerous than ever. Something was hunting them. Something that wasn't a zombie. And by the time the sun rose, one thing would be clear. Nowhere is safe anymore. 12:15 a.m. The warning. The truck rumbled down the abandoned highway. Lisa gripped Sophie tight, her heart still hammering from what they had seen at the farmhouse. Daniel stared out the window, rifle across his lap. That thing back there, it wasn't human. David tightened his grip on the wheel. Doesn't matter. Fort Blackwood is the only place left. Lisa glanced at the bloodied warning on the road sign. Turn back. She exhaled. But what if? Then, Sophie screamed. Lisa turned. A figure stood in the middle of the road. David cursed, yanking the wheel. The truck veered off the highway. And crashed. 12:30 a.m. The survivors and the dead. The world spun. Lisa's head slammed against the window. Glass shattered. Then, silence. Lisa groaned, forcing her eyes open. The truck was on its side in a ditch. Daniel coughed. Everyone okay? Lisa turned to Sophie. Baby, are you hurt? Sophie whimpered but nodded. Just scared. David groaned, pulling himself up. What the hell was that? Lisa turned to the road. The figure was gone. Daniel swallowed hard. We need to move. Then, a distant moan. Lisa turned. In the distance, a massive horde was moving toward them. David cursed. We don't have time for this. They grabbed their supplies and ran. 1 a.m. a new nightmare. They moved through the dark, weaving between wrecked cars and scattered bodies. Lisa's breath came in ragged gasps. The horde was getting closer. David cursed. We need shelter. Then, Daniel spotted it. A gas station, its sign flickering in the night. Lisa hesitated. It could be dangerous. David laughed bitterly. We just ran from shadow monsters, a horde of zombies, and a damn truck crash. I'll take my chances. They rushed inside. 1:30 a.m. the gas station. Inside, the gas station was eerily quiet. Shelves were toppled. Bloodstains marked the floor. But, no bodies. Daniel whispered, something's off. Lisa pulled Sophie close. We just need to rest. David locked the door. We'll take shifts. No one sleeps too long. Lisa sighed, sitting down. Just a few hours. Then, they heard it. A single knock on the door. Slow. Deliberate. Knock. 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 Lisa froze. David grabbed his shotgun. That's not a zombie. Knock. Knock. Then, a voice. Let me in. Lisa's breath caught. Sophie whispered, it's him. Lisa turned. Who? Sophie's eyes were wide. The man from the road. 2 a.m. the man in the dark. David whispered, no way we're opening that door. Daniel peeked through the broken blinds. Outside, standing in the darkness, was a man in a tattered military uniform. His eyes were hollow. His smile was too wide. He tilted his head. I can see you. David swallowed. What the hell is wrong with him? The man chuckled. I know what you are. Lisa's skin crawled. What does that mean? The man's voice was calm. Too calm. You've been marked. Lisa's stomach dropped. Then, the lights went out. 2:30 a.m. the blackout. Everything was pitch black. Lisa grabbed Sophie. Stay close. David fumbled for his flashlight. Daniel raised his rifle. Where is he? Then, the whispers returned. You don't belong here. They're coming. Lisa's heart pounded. Then, the glass shattered. A figure rushed in. David fired, bang. Silence. Then, the man's laughter filled the room. Lisa turned. He was standing right behind them. 3 a.m. the chase. Lisa screamed. David swung his shotgun, but the man was gone. Daniel grabbed Sophie. We're leaving. Now. They rushed out the back door. Lisa turned. The man stood in the gas station doorway, smiling. See you soon. Then, the horde appeared. Hundreds of infected, crawling over cars, sprinting toward them. Lisa grabbed Sophie and ran. Daniel fired into the crowd. Move! The man just watched. Laughing. Lisa didn't stop. Didn't look back. They fled into the night. 3:30 a.m. the storm. They ran until their legs burned. Until the gas station was far behind. Then, the storm hit. Lightning flashed. Thunder rumbled. Rain poured down, soaking them. Lisa held Sophie close. We have to keep moving. David shook his head. We need shelter. Daniel spotted a bridge ahead. Under there. They scrambled beneath it, panting. The storm raged. David wiped rain from his eyes. What the hell was that, man? Daniel's face was pale. I don't know. Lisa shivered. But he's not done with us. Then, Sophie spoke. Soft. Scared. Mommy, he's watching. Lisa turned. And froze. Standing on top of the bridge, silhouetted against the storm, was the man. Smiling. Watching. Waiting. Then. He vanished. 4 a.m. the final stretch. The rain began to die down. Lisa held Sophie close. David exhaled. We can't stop. We reach Fort Blackwood by dawn. Daniel nodded. If it's even still there. Lisa closed her eyes. They had survived the city. They had escaped the whispers in the dark. Now. They had one final night to survive. And as they started walking again, they had the sinking feeling they weren't alone. The survivors were so close. Fort Blackwood, their last hope, was only a few miles ahead. But the night wasn't over yet. The whispers still followed them. The horde was closing in. And the man in the dark wasn't done playing. By sunrise, they would find out the truth. There is no refuge. 4:15 a.m. the final road. The storm had passed, leaving the road soaked and slippery. Lisa carried Sophie, her arms aching. David limped beside her, shotgun in hand. Daniel led the way, his rifle raised. Ahead, through the fog, a fence came into view. Lisa's heart pounded. Is that? Daniel ran ahead. As the mist cleared, Fort Blackwood stood before them. 4:30 a.m. the fortress of the dead. Barbed wire. Guard towers. Concrete walls. It looked impenetrable. But something was wrong. Too quiet. Daniel approached the gate, scanning for movement. Then, he froze. Lisa followed his gaze and gasped. The walls were lined with bodies. Dead soldiers. Strung up. Torn apart. Left to rot. David muttered, Jesus. Lisa clutched Sophie. This wasn't a safe zone. It was a graveyard. Then, the gate creaked open. 5 a.m., welcome to hell. They hesitated. Then, a voice from inside. Hurry. Before they see you. Daniel raised his rifle. Who's there? A figure stepped into view. A soldier. Pale, wounded, eyes sunken with exhaustion. He waved them in. Now. Before they. Then, a scream from the towers. Lisa looked up. A man stood on the wall. Not a zombie. Not a soldier. The man from the road. Smiling. Watching. Waiting. The soldier's face drained of color. No, they followed you. 5:30 a.m., the final stand. Inside, Fort Blackwood was a war zone. Bloodstains. Burned-out vehicles. And corpses everywhere. Daniel grabbed the soldier. What happened here? The man's hands shook. The dead weren't the problem. It was them. Lisa whispered, them? The soldier's voice trembled. The ones that whisper. David's jaw tightened. What the hell are they? The soldier swallowed. We don't know. We just know they're coming. Then. The alarms blared. 6 a.m., the last war. The gates slammed shut. The horde arrived. Hundreds, no, thousands, of infected came pouring out of the trees. The soldier grabbed his rifle. They'll tear us apart. Daniel and David took positions. Lisa pulled Sophie behind cover. Then. The whispering started. Lisa's blood ran cold. The soldier's face twisted in horror. No, no, not now. Then. The lights flickered. The air grew heavy. And the figures in the dark appeared. 6:30 a.m., the shadows attack. They weren't zombies. They weren't human. They moved too fast, laughed too softly. And as the first soldier screamed, Lisa knew. They weren't fighting to survive. They were being hunted. 7 a.m., the bloodbath. The fortress fell apart. Zombies poured through the gates. The whispering became laughter. David fired, but his bullets passed through the shadows. Lisa ran. Sophie cried, "Mommy!" Daniel grabbed Lisa's hand. "We have to go." The soldier screamed as hands dragged him into the darkness. The man from the road watched it all. Smiling. Waiting. Enjoying the game. Lisa turned to Daniel. "There's nowhere left to run." 7:30 a.m., the choice. The survivors were cornered. David's gun was empty. Daniel's hands shook. Lisa held Sophie tight. The whispering grew louder. Then, the man finally spoke. "You've made it this far. Are you ready to see the truth?" Lisa's stomach twisted. Sophie whispered, "Mommy, don't listen." Daniel raised his gun. "We're not playing your game." The man's smile widened. "You already are." Then, the sun began to rise. 7:45 a.m., dawn's revelation. Light spilled over the fort. The shadows vanished. The whispering stopped. Lisa gasped for air, heart pounding. David fell to his knees. Daniel lowered his rifle. And the man in the road? Gone. Lisa turned to Daniel. "What just happened?" He shook his head. "I don't know. But it's not over." Then, Sophie whispered. Soft. Small. Terrified. "He's still watching." Lisa turned. And in the distance, standing in the ruins of the fort, the man stood once more. Waiting. Smiling. And as the sun fully rose, he vanished. 8 a.m., the nightmare begins. They had survived the first night. But the world had changed. Zombies were no longer the only threat. Something else was out there. Something worse. And as they walked away from Fort Blackwood, Lisa knew. The real nightmare had just begun. The end, for now.